Thanks, Tom. So I'm excited to be able to introduce these four panelists to you and to allow them to tell us a little bit about their experience along Aurora. We have Phillip Bradford, and I'm sure that they'll have more to say about themselves, but you can see on the screen their titles. And so Phillip Bradford, Judi Samuel, Linda, Julien, and Julio Perez. We're so thankful for you to be with us. And I think maybe if we could just start by having you tell us a little bit about your own experience on Aurora, your experience, especially without a car on Aurora. And so we'll just call on each of the panelists to describe their experience around a few different questions, and then we'll have some time for questions after that. But let's just hear from each one of you. If you would just introduce yourself briefly, and let's start with Phillip, please.
Very good evening, everyone. Thanks for joining us. I'm Phillip Bradford. I grew up along 130th, taught by my mother how to jaywalk Aurora because she knew it was going to happen back in the early 70s. My mom is continuing to live in the house that she raised me in. I have returned to the corridor to help take care of her, and because this is an exciting and enjoyable place for me to live. I often talk in what sounds to some people like irreverent tones about beautiful Aurora Avenue, but I truly believe it. And I believe in the potential and the seeds we're planting. Professionally, I work for the Disability Empowerment Center. It's a nonprofit where we believe that everyone in the Aurora corridor deserves to be included and to have choices. So we advocate for policies that make sure that people with disabilities have the same rights and opportunities to get around our corridor and to enjoy a quality life as everyone else.
Thank you so much, Phillip. That's wonderful to have you with us. And Judi, would you like to say a few words about your experiences? Judi, can you unmute yourself before you go on too far? Thank you.
Yeah, I live in Interurban along with Phillip, SHAG Interurban housing. I grew up on Beacon Hill, so this is the kind of new part of town to me. I only moved back here about 4 years ago. And I have to admit, I am somebody who thought I would be taking public transportation a lot more. But the 4-block walk and crossing Aurora has made me use my car more than I planned on. And also giving other people from Interurban rides to different places because it's hard to get to the bus stop and it's even harder to get back from the bus stop. So my background is in community organizing and particularly nonprofits.
Wonderful. Well, thank you, and great to have you with us. And Linda, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hello, I'm Linda Julien. I am a retired bookkeeper. I've lived in the Aurora corridor since 2016 and find the Bitter Lake area is really a beautiful place to live. So I've been enjoying it quite a bit.
Thank you so much, Linda. And Julio, would you like to introduce yourself briefly?
Yeah. So hi, everyone. I'm Julio Perez. I'm the North King County Mobility Coordinator. And I moved to Seattle a little over a year ago now. And yeah, I live now near the Aurora Avenue, but before I was living over by the U District. But my work, because I work at the Shoreline facility, which is on right next to Aurora and then Highway 99, so different wording there, but same road. But yeah, I commute through Aurora quite a bit. I was going 4 to 5 times a week for a little over a year until recently. I stopped going there that often as before. But yeah, I'm the North King County Mobility Coordinator, and we part of my work is advocating for more accessible transportation, which is what led me to this amazing group. So glad to be here. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Julio. We'll go in the reverse order for our first question. The first question is, if you could describe for us a typical route that usually you take along Aurora. And we'll start with Julio.
Okay, there we go. Yeah, so for the most part, I'm multimodal, meaning I switch between walking, the busing, the biking is the one thing I rarely do, and I'm opposed to doing it on a road just because of traffic, but that's just me. But a typical route for me my typical route now for me would be getting on Harrison Street where Aurora Avenue starts by the Seattle end of it, so the south end, or north south ends, yeah, and up to the north. So I can either do that, so I drive and take Aurora or I-5, but it really depends for me. Either I go for, according to Google, I can either go in the mornings, it's take I-5, and on the way back, because how heavy traffic is, I have to go all the way through Aurora Avenue to get all the way back home. And then from time to time, I'll take the E line, which is right next, like a 12-minute walk from me, and it just drops me off directly where I need to go over in Aurora. But that's typically what I use when I'm trying to commute to and from Aurora Avenue and locations. Typically I go to the, there's some of the markets, a little plaza where like LA Fitness is in those areas. So I do some shopping in LA Fitness in that area.
Yeah.
So that's typical.
Commuting to work and the full length of it sounds like.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. All right, and then Linda, you want to tell us about your typical route?
First, occasionally I take Aurora E-line, either north to Costco or all the way through the downtown area. But a typical once a week trip is to the Asian family food market or PetSmart. I have very demanding cats. I live halfway between Greenwood and Aurora, so I walk down 130th to usually Linden, and I wander through the New Haven area. They have a lovely walkway there, and there's a very large parking lot. And I will navigate through to the Key Bank, then to 135th, across the street, down to the complex that has a lot of different stores. Well, like the LA Fitness, where the new building's going to be, and then head south to PetSmart, over to 130th, and then up 130th to Aurora, and catch the bus back up the hill, so that by then I'm not interested in hauling the groceries any farther, so I just catch the bus. It's usually a lot of exercise. Since I'm not actually on Aurora very much, the only thing that I really watch for are the driveways and people who are turning either into the parking lots where I am, or left turns from the median into the driveway down to the Asian food market. The one wish I have for going further north is more crosswalks, say at 140th in particular. It would be very helpful to me.
Thank you, Linda. And I feel like you're getting ahead of to some other questions. You'll have the chance to comment on some more of those a little bit later. I wonder if we could hear from Judi about a typical route that you take along Aurora, Judi.
Well, I go both north and south on Aurora. I have relatives that live further south, and some groceries and doctors and things like that, but I also go up to Shoreline because sometimes the traffic going that direction from 145th is a lot easier. With their divided street, once it gets into Shoreline, it's easier to cross it's easier to cross Aurora. I do take the bus at times. I have AFib, so it depends on my condition for the day of whether I can walk that far and cross the street. and get on and off the bus. Some days I can and some days I can't. So, I use Aurora a lot. I rarely go on the freeway. If I am driving, I almost always navigate via Aurora.
Yeah, thank you. Wonderful. And then Phillip, would you like to describe your typical route along Aurora?
Thank you. I'm also a multimodal user. I'm a fan of the E-line, and on a quiet day, it's pretty enjoyable. It's a great route to get to downtown and a transfer to get to my office near Cherry Hill. In weather like this, enjoy the time that I have left as a person in their mid-60s to ride a Vespa scooter. 85 to 100 miles a gallon is a great motivator. So I look at the weather, I look at the forecast coming up in October, and I look at the shipment of all-weather tires that I'm expecting from San Diego, and I wonder if they're going to arrive in time. I remember last winter, I spent 5 months just riding the buses, and being able to get off the bus at 145th and Aurora and cross Aurora at that point was always a matter of having the eyes on the back of my head, wondering if somebody is going to speed around the corner, barely stop, if even slow down, and threaten pedestrians, which I've seen so many close calls time and time and time again. One thing I noticed, it seems that the Metro Transit stops for the E-line have sidewalk access. I suppose, a little push of the ADA has got something to do with that. But then you get further away, you end up in a parking lot. Not only the parking lot was just described by Linda, but the 10-degree or so angle Home Depot lot, which is got to be a challenge to roll on if you're on a walker with small wheels, if you're in a wheelchair, if you're at all trying to maintain some kind of a flat platform to be able to get up and down the street. Because obviously, as we've talked about here, and I'm so excited about the project, sidewalks seem to be an afterthought. It's not the 50s anymore. And for those of us along the Linden Avenue area where we've got so many mobility challenged neighbors of mine, it's a compare and contrast. On Linden, we have the sidewalks. On Aurora, we don't. So that being said, you have to go all the way from 143rd down to 135th, even on Linden, to get to a sidewalk. And that is, properly prepared with audio and video signals. I'm auditorily challenged. I have an auditory disability. In other words, there may be a blip before a signal hits me and I comprehend what it means. And that little blip could be, the 15 feet that somebody didn't hit their brakes and hits me. I have survived 2 different pedestrian collisions, not in Seattle, but I sure know what it feels like.
Thank you. I feel like we've got quite a diversity of busing and walking and driving and scootering and all kinds of other ways of getting around on Aurora. So thank you all for sharing your experience with us in those different modes of transportation. Our next question is about how the modes of transportation that you may not use as much affect your use of Aurora. And like I said, I think we got a little bit of this in some of your answers, but I'd love for you to comment directly on that. How do the buses and trucks and bikes that you're not driving affect the way that you use Aurora? And let's go ahead and start with Judi this time. Judi, would you like to comment on that?
Yeah, as I say, I started using the buses more, but I found that all of the stoplights, and I've checked them, 125th, 130, 135th, and 145th, are all 23 seconds to get across 5 lanes. That's 55 feet. I can't do that in 23 seconds. I can maybe, if I'm going a little bit faster, get to 4 lanes, and I don't use a walker. but I just can't walk that fast. I can't get across. That's why I use the car more now, because it's just safer. And that doesn't even count people coming around on right turn, which are a major problem because you don't really even have that length of time to get across the street. So that's, and the lights all seem to be about the same time. Between 135th and 145th, that's 10 blocks with no bus stops. You know, people have to go a ways to get between stops. Even from where we are close to 145th Street, to get a bus on Linden, you have to go all the way down to 135th Street also. So for people in walkers, I mean, I'm not with a walker, and I find 4 blocks of walking to get the bus line can be a lot on many days. People with walkers, it's even harder. I frequently give people lifts to the bus stop. The other thing is 141st Street is where the easiest entrance out of Interurban to get to Aurora is basically an alley. There are no sidewalks, there's potholes, there's no lighting. It's a dangerous place. So that means you have to go out of your way even to get to Aurora.
Right.
And nobody thinks of past 130th that it gets a little different further up. However, when you get to 145th Street on the other side in Shorewood, they actually have a divided median, which is a place you can actually stop when you walk across the street, which when I'm coming back, the bus lets off at north of 155th Street, 145th Street. And you can walk to the median and wait and cross the rest of it separately. So that's a thought too. It makes it easier to get across if you have to do it on 2 different lights, but.
Thank you. Lots of good ideas that you're bringing up there. Sorry, did you want to go on?
Oh, but the 23-second is not enough for 5 lanes, period.
Yeah. So the crossing time, as well as the intervals between crossing.
I don't see many bikes on this upper part of Linden because they're all on Aurora because they're all on Linden.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I've noticed with the bikes is they almost never stop at the stop signs. They do stop at the lights, but they never stop at the stop signs. And there are some along the route.
Yeah.
And they'll glide right through, whether you're walking or driving, they just go right through.
Thank you. All right, let's hear from Linda next. Linda, what would you name as some of the issues that you see that you're impacted by from the motor vehicles along or non-motor vehicles along the route?
One of the things that I was very happy to retire from was getting home at 7 o'clock at night at 130th and Aurora and seeing the freight trucks parked on Aurora that are supplying the Subway store, not Subway, Starbucks. And then also the large trucks that carried the cars to offload to the various car lots that are right there. So I would get off on at 130th and wander very carefully through these freight cars and to the Japanese place that has the very good rice dishes, and then home. So I don't miss that.
Thank you. Yes, that freight trucks loading and parking in the shoulder, making it even more complicated when there's no sidewalk to get through there on foot, for sure. Thank you. And Julio, would you like to comment on this one?
Yeah. So for me, both buses and trucks, it's more of from a walking perspective for me when I do walk, since I enjoy it. for the buses, from one, I'm pretty sure everyone here is aware, drug use surrounding buses and things like that. So walking at night, when I first moved to Seattle a year ago, I wasn't aware of how bad things were in this city. The drivers here, I feel, are the worst drivers ever, but that's just my personal opinion, given I've almost been hit twice. And someone hit and run me and they just left. I was like, okay. But for buses, just walking, when I first moved, I was walking at night. I wasn't aware of how things on Aurora were at the time. So surrounding buses, when I was walking, it just for me, it makes me uncomfortable walking around bus stops when I see someone using drugs and things like that. So it just makes me uncomfortable. And as for bikes, I feel that they create unsafe driving conditions at times, just because when I'm driving, I personally feel afraid that I'm gonna hit them, because when they're too close, there's a lot of heavy traffic, and I personally like giving myself enough room to avoid any like hitting him or them having an accident, falling over and me hitting him. So I always have to move over. So those are just situations that I've been noticing when I go to Aurora's surrounding those two things.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah. And then Phillip, any ideas that you'd like to add on how some of the vehicles that are there that you're not driving impact your use?
Well, I don't jaywalk anymore. I can tell you, unfortunately, I have witnessed too regularly people using walkers, jaywalking between 137th and 145th just to get across the street. It chills me. For myself, in addition to having to cut across parking lots to catch an E-line, back to the scooter, it's 300 pounds of metal underneath me, and normally riding at 30 miles an hour along Aurora, it doesn't really affect me until I look down and realize there's only 300 pounds of metal underneath me while I'm doing that. Where it really affects me is when I get south of 135th, and suddenly there's this fantastic circus coming out of both the east and west parking lots, the very large parking lots between 130th and 135th, and people using that median area as a staging area to figure out how they're going to make the turn once they've decided to commit to it. And I have to be at high alert anyway riding, but right there, my peripheral vision just, it clicks in, and I'm pretty sure that I hold my breath without realizing it until I pass underneath the 130th bridge and continue south. It's been said by a lot of folks in our neighborhood that when you get north of 85th Street, the sidewalk situation deteriorates rapidly, and I believe that there's actual planning involved in how that turned out. But you go north of 115th, you get especially north of the cemetery, and good luck finding a place for yourself if you don't have four wheels. I still drive my nearly 94-year-old mother, who Laura may have met at one point, to and from stores, and we have to be very careful looking at how many people are coming into the driveways there. Sometimes we'll just skip it. Sometimes we'll wait an hour and circle back and hit that store when it looks a little safer to get in and out of, because I only have one mother and she's done pretty well so far, getting to nearly 94 years old. I said the word circus, and it is, and I know it's not intentional with the people that are using that stretch. For the most part, I see people who are focused and merely trying to get where they need to go without hurting themselves or anybody else.
Yeah, thank you. You all have brought up really important concerns that you have around using the road, and especially using the road when you're not encased in metal, like Phillip was just describing. So thank you all for that. Our next question is about what would be your biggest hope for the process of reimagining Aurora based on your own personal experiences along the corridor? What do you hope is possible in terms of better access or ease of use for people without cars? And I think everyone's had a chance to start except for Linda. So Linda, will let you start the last round.
At roughly 141st in Aurora, where the Holiday Inn used to be, it's now Mary's Pilgrim Inn. In that 1.5 block stretch, there's beautiful parking lane that is a bit of lawn with some very pretty bushes, trees. It made me think of how Linden looked like from 145th to 130th. It's a very pretty street. It was just a lovely patch of green. And I wish that Aurora had many, many more lovely patches of green.
Thank you. And there's so many good reasons that we wish for urban green space, right? We have the beauty of it, and also there are so many other reasons to hope for green space. Julio, let's go to you next. What is your biggest hope for the Aurora corridor?
Yeah, so based on my experience, and recently I was visiting California, visiting family in Redwood City and San Francisco, and they have a really great, in Redwood City specifically, they have a really great design that I would wish to hopefully see in Aurora. But the way they did their road is where they have the road so cars can drive, they have the designated lane for people cycling, whatever they're doing, and then they have 2 painted roads painted blue, and it's for people walking. So that way, and the cars separate the people from the traffic. So I thought that was a really great design to have implemented on those that strip of road. So that was a really great design. And that'd be one thing I would like to see in Aurora. The other one, from what I've noticed on Aurora, crossings are very distant from one another. Like, people have to walk very long distances to be able to cross without jaywalking and risking getting hit by a car. And I've seen people like in walkers having to like walk massive down. Like, someone shouldn't have to do that, especially in a walker, to be able to cross to the other side of the road. So one thing I would also like to see is islands. I've seen other cities use islands as a way to mitigate the oncoming traffic. So then pedestrians can just wait in the center while cars are doing their thing, and then they can find a safe time to approach. Just closing that gap of so much distance between every crossing. Like, to me, it just doesn't feel like it welcomes people that are walking or biking. Like, if you have to walk that long just to be able to cross the street. And jaywalking, I see it a lot. People just sitting on the turning lanes, just waiting there to traffic slow down. So having an island, for me, it seems ideal, since people are going to jaywalk either way. Just implementing that design, knowing that people are going to jaywalk one way or another to get across. I feel like they should just, city planning wise, they should just implement that. But that's just my opinion on that.
Thank you. Yeah, so addressing the frequency of crossings, and then also the safety of crossings. And I think someone mentioned earlier also the idea of having the opportunity to use the median so that it could take 2 lights to get across, and you have a safe place to wait in between.
Yeah.
So kind of reinforcing that. Yeah, thank you. All right, Phillip, do you want to share your biggest hope for the corridor?
I'm going to use the word equity. When I go down into Ballard to grab a bite to eat with friends, we can park our vehicles, whatever they are. We can find a crosswalk. We can find an audio and a visual signal when it's safe to cross. I don't see the close calls. I see the close calls of people try to jaywalk, try to take a shortcut, get too excited. But overall, that stretch, the U District, Roosevelt, where I see a lot of activity around 65th, trying to get Roosevelt Way just right now. These things reflect the need to look at all the multi-generational needs in a city, and all the families, including those families who have raised their kids and to make sure that everybody of every age has a safe place to hang out. When you hit 80 years old, you don't stop wanting to hang out. Currently, I have a participant in a Disability Empowerment Center program that I met with this morning, when we talked about it's not necessarily a good idea to go down to the donut place at 135th until we have a plan to make it a little bit safer. We don't want to restrict our activities. We don't want to restrict our choices for both recreation, for shopping, for work, but we've got to do a lot better job in making this side of North Gateway look as inviting as the south side of North Gateway, and to steal some of these successful ideas from the smaller neighborhood arterials and implement them. So yeah, more U district, Roosevelt Ballard philosophy where we are, and to make it a place where a diminished number of cars over the years are going to be replaced by an increasing number of people feeling comfortable to ambulate. Thanks.
Thank you. All right, Judi, you get the last word on this one. What is your biggest hope for the process of reimagining Aurora?
Well, I hope it won't be a project from 95th to 110th or so that they're planning, which will take out a lane in each direction and have only one car lane and one bus lane with 2 bike lanes, one on each side. I think that's going to be a roadblock that will back up traffic all the way up to where we are. I do like the what Julio mentioned too, the looking north at 125th where they have the median, they have trees, which is lovely, and use that center lane. I think that for our section, steering bikers over to Linden is a better idea than putting a bike lane anywhere in this area. I don't know about from 125th to 130th, but there may be a way that that could be done too. I definitely agree with Phillip that, and I have a number of friends that have hearing problems, and a beeper along with a longer light could make a lot of difference for older people. I've also seen at 135th Street, people kind of cutting across that are going to Social Security. And on 130th, I've looked at different times, and I don't think in the 4 years I've been here, I've ever seen anybody walk across the bridge there. The long stairs, even the kids, which I thought might, going to Ingram, might cross there, they just hustle across the sidewalk. Nobody's using that bridge. If it had an elevator or something, maybe people would use it, but the long stairs, there's nobody in the elder community that's going to be hiking up those stairs to cross the street. Let's see, the longer lights, I said, the divider, possibly using that and putting some trees on it just to, you know, make it a little more attractive, which might help.
Wonderful. Thank you. Yes, it's amazing to me how many 90-plus-year-old neighbors we have in the 130th area. And yeah, I have not seen any of them climbing those stairs yet.
Well, between our Interurban and New Haven and for Freedom, there's a lot of elderly population on Linden that's using those same between 130th and 145th. That's where they're accessing Aurora and the bus lines there. There is a bus that goes down Linden and turns on 130th to Aurora. And actually, if that bus turned on 145th Street and they made a bus stop by the little park there, the playground area, where there's already a little road inlet, like they do at Four Freedoms, it would be an ideal place. And then they would need some kind of light or something for people to get across there. But it's already city property. It has a space that could be made a bus stop there. And for the number of low-income people along Linden, I think that would make sense.
Yeah, yeah. So going back to Phillip's idea about equity and really making that space that is so used by so many of our community members, an equitable and safe place to be accessing bus lines. Yeah, thank you. Well, thank you all for your questions. And I wonder if you four have things that you want to comment on what each other has said, but I also want to open it up to other people who are in the meeting. And so if you have questions that you'd like our panelists to address, you're welcome to put those in the chat. And panelists, if you have anything that you'd like to address from what each other has said, you're welcome to take another couple minutes now and to share any additional thoughts there. Let's see if I see anything in the chat here. Yeah, so there's a question about whether, I think this is the question, Gordon, you can help me understand if I'm getting it wrong, but whether it would be useful to have a shuttle bus in addition to the E-line that would perhaps connect light rail to some of the Aurora facilities. I know that there is a lot of work being done within the neighborhoods department at the city about how the Aurora corridor will be connected to the light rail. But yeah, Linda, I see your finger there, and I saw
the 345 does connect. It runs down 130th to Meridian and then over to the Northgate Transit Center. So it's been very, very useful for me to connect with Lake City in particular, and as well as the Shoreline King County Library on the 347. So the other thing about that particular bus is that it goes to Shoreline Community College, turns into a 331, and then goes over to the Costco at 205th. So it's been fun learning all of these routes. There are two different services that provide transportation for seniors that are in limited income. There's the Hyde Shuttle and another one through Sound Generations, which does some transportation. So it's available. It's just finding it is not always that easy.
right.
And you have to
Judi?
reserve ahead of time.
You have to reserve ahead of time. Yeah. So yeah, thank you, Linda, for naming that there is connectivity between Aurora and the existing light rail station at Northgate. That's important to know. And then also, as we're planning ahead for new light rail stations at 130th and 145th, and starting to really understand how connectivity will change, because they will change things, and what kinds of things are available is important. And I think also Judy's point that not everybody lives right at a bus station, a bus stop. And so having to walk 4 blocks to the bus stop and then take a bus to get on the light rail, that's a lot of transferring, potentially a lot of stairs, a lot of hiking around. And so that increases the barriers to public transit as well. So yeah, thank you both. Phillip and Julio, do you want to comment at all on that connectivity between light rail and Aurora?
I can comment. One service I would like to see once the Link light rails open up, I don't know if anyone's ever heard of the Via to Transit, which is in South King County, which connects to transportation hubs. I don't know what it would take to get that service in the north area. I know it's available in the south area. So like Tequila, Othello, Rainier Beach, and Skyway, if I remember this correctly. And that service is just, it helps get people to and from key destinations and connecting them to transit hubs. So that'd be a great service, I feel, once those stations now, or when those stations open up, having that available for residents in the Shoreline and the Aurora area, when all those transit agencies, that'd be a great one. It would take a little bit of advocating, and Metro, I believe, is the one who we would have to advocate for. But yeah, that would be a great service to see, hopefully, in the North King County area, to help residents connect to key destinations in the Link light rails.
Yeah, thank you. That's a great idea. And then Phillip, did you want to comment on that?
Thank you. I think it's important to stay in touch with our elected officials and make sure that all our available federal transportation dollars are drawn down to support projects that make sense. Just as we talk about food deserts and the ability to get nutritious food, we have transit deserts where you can get a bus along 3rd Avenue Northwest, 8th Avenue Northwest. You get the other side of Aurora West, south of 125th. There's a big zone of, as has been mentioned, you know, it's an awful long hoof just to get to a bus stop. And at that point, having a 130th Street light rail station, which I'd like literally, and I'm not being facetious here, I'd like to catch a train there before I die. And I'd like to take my mom there, come on, and go to the airport.
Yeah.
But a bus that will truly take care of those dead zones and get people to those light rail stations, it's going to take thinking big and acting big when it comes to acting on the resource acquisition level. And I know we've got a lot of priorities, but we have to think about, again, a 21st century Aurora corridor and the people that live within a mile, 2 miles of there. Like my supervisor Cassidy, who I believe is listening in. That whole area between Greenwood, Aurora is so important. There are so many longstanding families that have made commitments and made financial commitments, invested in this area. I don't want to let them down as their mobility issues increase. It's too important. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you. So we have a couple other questions in the chat. And one, I think probably we have some differences of opinion. So I would just love to hear a little bit more. I think we've heard a couple people say that part of their hope is for less car traffic. And some people say that part of their hope is for safer car traffic, but not having long backups for the car. So I think Brent McFarland is naming that there might be some incentives that could be put in place to make it appealing for people to not drive. So I didn't know if any of you would maybe want to comment on that idea of perhaps encouraging less driving, given that there's all kinds of challenges with that, as you've already named. So Judi, do you want to start us off there?
I would love to drive less. If the transportation, if you could get on the transportation a little easier, I would definitely take my car off the road. I mean, except for hauling things occasionally, but yeah. But when I saw the plan for further down, where they were basically making 1 lane for bus and 1 lane for cars and 2 bike lanes, that seemed a little extreme to me. Because I noticed that during COVID, when they were giving shots along 130th, it backed up for miles. The cars in 1 lane was just not moving. And that's what I envision if they cut it down to 1 traffic lane on each side. When you have, as somebody else said, the trucks still making deliveries up here and all too, that just doesn't seem feasible to me. I do hope there will be less traffic. Mm-hmm. But squeezing the traffic, I don't think is a solution.
Thank you. Thank you. Julio, do you want to comment on that idea? Encouraging less cars?
Yeah, I mean, I feel a lot of it, this is my opinion, a lot of it goes to, in our culture, we like independence, so a lot of decentivizing someone from driving. It gives that sense that we're losing our independence, I feel like. And it's just, and then part of it also would have to be making other alternatives to driving a little bit more appealing to people to be able to decentivize them from not to drive. So that would, how that would look, I don't know. Would that be more safer transit or more, even though the E-line runs, what, every 10, 15 minutes or so, it goes just in a certain straight line, and then you have to walk to, if you have to go a mile the other way or things like that. So you have to switch. So having more alternatives to being able to be spontaneous when someone wants to plan a trip, because the way it is right now, you have to plan ahead, like hours ahead without like thinking. Some people we're like, oh, I just want to catch the bus, go do my thing and be there. But like quickly, and that's just not possible with, in my opinion, with the current transit system, the way things are set up at the moment.
Thanks. And Phillip, I see your hand. Phillip, can you unmute? It'll be easier to hear you. Thanks.
Thank you. Judi, yes, but I do agree. It's a definite transition period. And I think the opening of this meeting, the graphic illustrations of the timeline involved, we're still in the fix-it period and discussion period. We've got multiple legislative sessions ahead. I would like to still be around, living as independently as possible with the fewest restrictions when much of this kicks off. But to illustrate my point, I grew up a car buff. And until a few years ago, I would not be without at least one four-wheeled vehicle. I used to drag race. I used to go cruising with Larry Baumgartner. I was totally convinced that a V8 Ford was the answer to many of my transportation problems, and that the bus was just when things got crowded, when, you know, an afterthought, the car broke down, etc. Now I wouldn't be without Metro. I still consider it my primary transportation, even though, as I said, during weather like this, I make different choices, but those choices have a lighter and lighter carbon footprint. My scooter is rated for German pollution control guidelines, not American control guidelines. And my choice of vehicle was largely because of that. My next vehicle will not be an internal combustion vehicle. I know this now. There are too many options. And I want to feel like I can step every few minutes onto a bus to get where I need to, just like every few minutes, the E-line comes along. If you spend any time outside of the immediate Seattle, King County area and use their transit systems, you know that we have a lot of issues, but in so many ways, our access is so far progressed. And it was a relief to move back here and to realize I didn't have to have personal transportation most of the time. It is a graduating curve. And I'm sitting on that. As I mentioned, I'm probably going to have to give up my own vehicle, at least this particular one, in a few years. I won't be able to safely handle it. In 20 years, I'd like to feel like I didn't even miss it.
Thank you. And Linda, would you like the last word on encouraging fewer cars on the road?
If I had my wishes, they would have more. I do enjoy walking. I don't have a number of places to walk to, sit down, relax, and then walk home. That I would like more of. I've also noticed that most of the, not all, but most of the restaurants are on the east side of Aurora. And of course, there's a Burger King, whose lobby is not open on the west side. But the east side restaurants are too difficult for me to get to when it's 5 and 10 blocks around Robin. I'm no longer quick enough to jaywalk. I have to have a lighted intersection.
Yeah, thank you. So definitely thinking about how to get across the street as much as getting up and down the street. And yeah, if you need a car to get across the street, then that doesn't help you to be able to use the restaurants, right? All right, Judi, I feel like there's a rebuttal coming. Go for it.
Well, not really. I grew up in Seattle, and I can remember as a teenager and a young adult, I didn't have a car or use a car. I got everywhere on the bus. But in my 70s, I can't do that as easily. I need the buses to be closer. When I was young, it was no problem to walk a ways to get the bus or walk a ways when you got off the bus. But now that's a problem. And really the biggest thing, I think, or one of the first things might be at least being able to cross the street to where the restaurants are. If the lights were just a little bit longer. I mean, because 55 feet to cross the street, they're about 11 feet per lane. There's 5 lanes. Walk it sometime and see how long it takes. I did a test with a couple of friends here. There's hardly anybody our age group that could get across that in 23 seconds, that distance.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's just, and the beep or something would help. Just even that as a first thing, just make them a little bit longer.
Yeah. Yeah.
Give people a chance to get across.
Thank you. All right. Let's see. We have a question in the chat about comparing Aurora to other roads. So we've had several other roads that we've been mentioning, Interurban, as well as 15th and Ballard, as well as Roosevelt in the U District, as well as, I didn't get the name of the road, but something in Redwood City. We had a bunch of different roads comparing Aurora to these other places. And so the question is, how are these other streets different from Aurora? I mean, Aurora is a state highway, so that's sort of an obvious piece, but are there other key differences that you see that are going to be challenges to implementing some of the solutions that have been implemented there? And does anybody want to take the first crack at that one? Linda, go for it.
Lake City Way is fairly interesting. I was recently out there, and it has quite a lot of traffic, some truly intriguing intersections. It's busy, noisy, and has lots of sidewalks. So sidewalks are very, very helpful.
Yeah, so comparing Aurora to Lake City and noting that some of the recent improvements along Lake City that have added some sidewalks and more clearer ways of crossing and walking have been really helpful. Yeah, absolutely. Let's see, should we go to Julio next? Julio, you were talking about something in Redwood City. Did you see any major differences that might become challenges to implementing any of those solutions here?
Yeah, so I mean, this is my first time as an adult going back to Redwood City and seeing what they had. One difference I noticed, I mean, for me as someone who walks, it's more, you get a sense of safety that you don't have to worry about getting hit by cars. Here in Seattle, the buckling on the sidewalks, it makes it just not ideal for someone who's in a wheelchair, someone who uses a walker. It's like a roller coaster ride for them trying to walk sidewalks here in Seattle. Over there, there's really no buckling that I saw, at least on some of the main roads that I walked when I was exploring. And then again, just being able to separate drivers, bikers, and pedestrians from one another, like it just gives you that sense of safety. Like I don't have to worry about this cyclist hitting me, or I don't have to worry about this car hitting me. If there's a car that crashes, the first thing they're going to hit is either a pole they set up as a safety guard or a car that's parked on the side of the road. So that's just my experience with it. And with Aurora, I've only lived here a year, so I'm not too familiar, and I've only walked certain sections of highway. And from what I've seen, again, those long distances and the gap, let's just say that for me, seeing this the way it is right now, it just doesn't seem ideal, and it's not accessible for a lot of people from what I've noticed. And then for sidewalks, I've always seen one question that always comes up and I've heard is who maintains the sidewalks from tree branches and things like that? Because some areas, the city really doesn't do anything. Like I've seen someone walking their child with a stroller and having to cut down branches while they're walking the sidewalk is because no one maintains that section of the city. So that's always a question that comes up: who's going to maintain the sidewalks if we are going to make it more accessible, more friendly?
Yeah, so that ambiguity about responsibility for sure. Thanks. Let's see, Phillip, you had a comment in the chat about need to support small businesses. And that's definitely one of the things that's really important at ARC. And so I'd love to hear more about that. Do you see that as a difference between Seattle and other places?
Well, not so much, but Seattle. I was thinking about Aurora and Lake City. Lake City Way between 122nd and 140th anyway. It's pretty flat, and there are sidewalks there. There are a wide variety of businesses. There is also 30th right west of those businesses along Lake City Way on the west side. So you can get to Bartell's, you can get to a really great bakery that a lot of families enjoy on a weekend. You can get to Dick's Drive-In without having to take Lake City Way if you're going south. To get to Burger Master on Aurora, there is absolutely, a spot if you cut through the big parking lot past Pilgrim Coffee House, a way to get into there. But it's not really the drive-in with your crew access. It's not what people think about. It's definitely not the direction the signage is directed to. There's several home improvement ranging from raw lumber material to the Lowe's and the Home Depot within 3 miles of each other, and things that involve a lot of traffic going in and out. I kind of like the idea of a bunch of widely varied small businesses if people can get in and out of them without risking themselves. And the standard of in a wheelchair or using a walker, can I get to these places? Can I get anywhere close to their front door without having to look behind me and see if somebody's about to come close? That's not necessarily the case. Lake City, it seems much more topographically and design, a way to get things you're interested in and activities that you're interested in doing with your friends. So we can, again, steal from Lake City, from Roosevelt, from the U District, ideas that have helped support the economy and support affordable residences if we actually get deliberate in design. And that's part of universal design for me.
Yeah, thank you. So a little bit of geography there, just in terms of having a hill that goes up from the roadway on one side, but also perhaps a little bit of the fact that Lake City is on a diagonal. And so there are some kind of back ways into some of those businesses, but that there's definitely a lot of opportunities in what I'm hearing you all say, for sure. Yeah. Let's see. Judi, did you have a chance to answer that question? I don't remember what I've done here.
I think so.
Okay.
I think I've covered it in others.
Okay.
I didn't know some of those other places as well, but small businesses would be nice.
Yeah.
But it does take parking for those small businesses too, because you can't really park along Aurora. You have to pull off of it.
Yeah, especially in the Bitter Lake area, right? The parking is in these large lots. In other parts of Aurora, the parking is organized really differently. So yeah, we can.
But there's almost no parking along the side of the street. You have to pull into a parking lot.
Right.
And the small businesses, that means an extra expense to have the parking lot is often a problem for small businesses. Where in Lake City, you can park on the street and be able to access it right off the sidewalk.
Yeah.
So that is some difficulty.
Yeah.
Not impossible, but
right.
Make it a little trickier.
Yeah, it all comes down to that.
Stores will go for the big parking lots, and
Yeah. All right. Well, Tom and others, I'm not seeing other questions in the chat right now. Excuse me. Are there other things that we should address from the chat, or are there other questions that are coming up that I'm not seeing?
Well, one of the things that probably should be mentioned, because I've heard it from people I've talked to here in terms of walking along Aurora, the number of working women I mean, I've hardly gone along Aurora from 145th down to about 125th when there hasn't been at least 10 working ladies. And there's some people that intimidates them from walking. I don't find it a problem, but I mean, there are some in this building.
Absolutely. Yeah. I kind of getting at some of the issues that Julio was talking about as well, that there are a lot of types of use scenarios going on along Aurora, and that is uncomfortable for some people. And, you know, especially families with young children, it's difficult to figure out the best way for getting kids to school and things like that when we're sharing the road with a lot of different kinds of users. So yeah, thank you for naming that, Judi. That's important. All right. Well, Tom, is there anything that you would like to add at this point? We've got Landy Jiang asking in the chat, what is the current priority for building sidewalks on the unsidewalked parts of Aurora? The current $2 million Seattle project does not mention it. Yeah, thank you, Landy. I can address that, and I'm guessing that Tom and Lee will chime in as well. So right now, the $2 million project that Metro and SDOT are working on jointly is a study project that is trying to identify what the priorities for addressing the entire corridor will be. And so that $2 million is not earmarked for doing any spot improvements at this point. There probably will be some recommendations for spot improvements that come out of that study, but it is not designed to actually accomplish them. And so there are a lot of people doing a lot of grants right now for federal dollars to try to invest in areas, especially in the Bitter Lake area of Aurora, where the sidewalks are just not there, to try to make that one of the high priorities, because of course it's going to be one of the things that SDOT recommends, right? I mean, that's, everybody recognizes that this is the most dangerous road and the most dangerous section of a road in all of the city of Seattle. So it absolutely has to be one of the high priorities to get done first. And of course, also in identifying where the sidewalks are, you have to identify a whole lot of other design constraints like we've been talking about. And so that's why the study project has to happen first, so that we understand where I'm talking like I'm on SDOT, but so that SDOT understands where the sides of the roadway are, where the lanes of traffic are, where the median is, where the green space is going to be, where the wastewater is going to go, where the stormwater is going to go. All of that has to be decided before you put a sidewalk down, because once the sidewalk's down, you can't, well, you wouldn't want to tear it up to have to put in a pipe underneath or something like that. So yeah, Landy, good question. And absolutely one of the things that ARC is pushing for really hard when we talk with SDOT and trying to get that to be a very high priority project. Absolutely. Yeah. Tom, Lee, others, anything you want to add?
Laura, that was a great answer. The only thing I'd add to it, since I know a lot of folks, when we mention this kind of factoid, they are astounded and had no idea prior. When talking about sidewalks, it bears repeating over and over again that they are very expensive to build. $2 million might sound like a lot for a study, but when it comes to actually implementing infrastructure like pouring concrete to build a sidewalk, and if needed in some parts of Aurora, there are drainage issues, you'd have to do some drainage work underneath the sidewalk before you can even pour the concrete for the sidewalk. It can cost somewhere between $1 million and $2 million per city block to put down sidewalks. So when we're talking about 30 to 40 blocks without real sidewalks along Aurora on each side, we're talking about hundreds of millions of dollars to actually build out a real pedestrian infrastructure in the Bear Lake neighborhood. And this is one of the main reasons why more grant funding is needed, and a lot more advocacy from all of us as community members is definitely needed, so that we can encourage SDOT, partner with SDOT wherever possible, so that they can acquire those funds through grants, through legislation, however necessary. We need to find the money to build out the sidewalks in Bitter Lake, but we have to also recognize it's going to be a huge investment over the next decade, maybe more than a decade.
Thanks, Tom. Max is also raising an editorial from the Times that was from September 1st about the Green Lake Outer Loop that Tom was talking about earlier, and looking for possible collaborators on a response. So I would encourage you to take a look at that. All right, well, I'm not seeing a whole lot of other comments or questions at this point, so I'd just like to thank our panelists so much for being here with us today and bringing your perspectives and sharing your experiences along the corridor. Phillip, I see your hand. Did you want to have a last? Oh, nope. Okay, just taking over.
Just thank everybody for their 90 minutes away from Russell Wilson tonight. This is so valuable.
Yes, it is. It's important for us to really be able to hear from people who use the corridor in all kinds of different ways so that we can understand and really be taking each other's perspectives into account. So thank you so much for being here. And thanks everyone who took 90 minutes out of their evening to consider what using Aurora without a car might look like. Really appreciate everyone's participation.